Hello everybody. So I have been doing some testing, things that I thought had been happening, but until I really plotted it all out, I thought it was just sort of in my own noggin. Turns out shields here are not super great. As you can see on the top left, the current early access build is 4129 point blah blah blah. This obviously, these things going in the future as they continue to work in the game may very well be a moot point in future, but at current, shields are not great. And I've got some math on that. Next thing you're going to see is a spreadsheet. Please don't run away. Yes, I am that kind of person. Yes, I am very sorry. But we've got some spreadsheeting. So let's go look at it. Okay, so what do I mean by blocking is bad? Why is it not good? So really we need to start sort of at the beginning, just so everyone can understand my process. That way, if you wish to do your own testing, you can at least kind of get where I'm coming from here. First, it started with me checking to see how various armor values would influence damage received. Now, all this testing was done on a black bear, because its swipe, as you can see here, does 66 damage on a naked body, and then as I geared up in different gearing bits, you can see here how those swipes affected the damage received. So for these tests, I was in the metal, and this was all basically pre-pure iron. So basically pre-pure iron, or rather pre-steel, and pre-T2 hide. So this is kind of really what just about anybody can go out and get in, without any horrible grinding. So we can see here that based on your armor, the actual stamina that the blocking uses stays the same. Armor does influence damage received through the block. So the more armored you are, less damage you receive through the block. Pretty straightforward. The problem here is damage received and stamina used. So we can see here, block rating of 10, 20, and 40. I was very fortunate at the time that my Great Maul with my block skill made it to 20, so this is a very nice breakdown here of our block rating. So we can see with a block rating of 10, and this again is in the metal armor here, our stamina and our health, both 16. Every swipe we take at a block rating of 10, we're getting 16 per. We get up to 20, this is the Great Maul, 20 stamina, 12 health. This is the Viking shield, though it rated 40, 22 stamina, 7.5 health, and that's again every bear swipe. So what does that mean? What does that matter? What's so important about it? Well, the problem is that in the current game, stamina is part of our overall health pool. So think of it as the effective hit points, like you might in any other kind of MMO or any other kind of game where there's, armor values and so forth. This is just taking the stamina and the health, and we're basically adding those two together to create one giant health bar. Because in current game, the only real thing you're doing is, unless you're in a big giant group and you're just essentially alpha striking everything down with pure attacks, you're going to have to block. And since block uses stamina and keeps us from dying, we're adding that to our total effective health pool. So what we get here between, if we add both the stamina and the health together, because again that's our collective health. With the Great Maul, we're receiving essentially 32 points of total damage. With that rated 40 Viking shield, we are receiving a total 29.5 damage per bear swipe. So between these two, this is really it's not really much of a difference at all. Again, if you go back up to here, we take less stamina damage with a Great Maul, but a little more health damage. But stamina does not regenerate in combat while we're doing actions. So if we're holding up the block, stamina doesn't regen. If we're attacking, stamina doesn't regen. So it's a pretty static pool, a resource pool, unless we're dropping block, stopping our attack, and we try to circle strafe or move around. Only then will our stamina return. Health, on the other hand, whether we're blocking, attacking, whatever we're doing, its regen rate is constant. Why does any of that matter? It matters because the damage difference between like weapons, and so by that is things within the same difficulty tier, which is a little difficult to try to piece out given how they're sort of staggered all around the place currently. But from what I've been able to find, it looks like your two-handers within the same weapon type, so one-handed sword, two-handed sword, so on and so forth, the difference between the two weapon types within their same difficulty tier is about, in pure damage, 33% more for the two-handed weapon, which of course makes sense. Two-handed weapons, you're giving up defense. In a place of that, you're getting more offense, therefore more damage. Every game does it. It makes sense. It's fine. The problem in current PAX Day is, again, looking at our total health pool, is that we're not really taking that much more damage with a two-hander as we are with a shield. And taking that just a few points fewer damage with a shield, we are losing out on a lot more damage. So how does all that, what does that all come down to? So I let myself get hit by a bear, again, in the middle, with the same block values, to see how many times it would take for me to die getting hit by a bear. So we can see here, we actually have, which makes sense, we are going to die in about one fewer hit with the two-handed weapon as opposed to the shield if all we did was stand there and just block. Again, just pure effective hit points versus bear swipe in the again in that metal armor value. So we're not really any more survivable with a shield. Now there are of course a great many things that come into play here. There's all the various regen values, spells, better gear. This is just pure base standard values here. We're not getting too crazy in that. We're just looking at our shields essentially. Are they any good? We can see here that this is all from the PAX Day little wiki that people have been working up. So assuming that it is all accurate, the black bear has 546 HP. So with a simple spear, and again this is assuming with 0% mitigation, my simple spear does 28 damage. And so if I had a one-handed spear of the same skill rating and the same difficulty rating, with it doing 33% less damage, it should do about 18.48 per hit. So with the simple spear, this is after our mitigations. You can see here that the difference between actually hitting the animal to kill the black bear with our that simple spear, rounding up, is about 33 hits to kill. With that one-handed weapon, again of presuming same difficulty tier, values all the way through, rounding up, we're looking at 50 hits to kill. That's quite a big difference. And again, that difference in time to kill is at the, it's at real no noticeable defensive value. Because these two values are so close together, and yes, we're taking more health damage when we're using a two-hander weapon, but again, with regeneration factoring into play, and as we get higher and higher armor values, that actually becomes less and less of a problem. So taking on from a black bear to something that we can solo, because we're not soloing a black bear, not with these kind of stats and these kind of values. You can't. Well, okay, you can. Just it's difficult. You can't just. It's not a straight up fight. You've got to juke and dive and wear it out. So let's take an Inquisitor Pura for example. This is a fight you can solo. relatively decently easily, again with some of this just basic Metal Gear and so forth. So they've got about 300 HP, and we, with our effective hit points, have about 300 HP. Again, this can be more with better food buffs. This is just, again, based on value. So the Pura, with my simple spear, takes about 18 to 20 damage. For some reason, there's that variance. And there's variance in his attacks as well against me when I block with the two-handed weapon. I take about 10 to 15 damage per hit. So you can see here, simply by blocking and then attacking, blocking, attacking, that same old song and dance, I can wear out a Pura pretty evenly. If I were to do this with a shield, that might not actually be possible, because my own damage might be like his damage, and so it may very well be who swings first, and with as janky as the game is, did it register my blocking time? So hopefully with this math you can see, as scatterbrained as it might be, shields are actually not great. They don't really provide you a super good value against tougher enemies than a two-handed weapon does, and the overall total HP values, they're current, for these values here, they're all about the same. Now, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I don't want to be like, oh no, shields totally suck, man. I want to provide some kind of a solution as to what I think the devs can do within the game to make shields a practical choice, a good choice, as opposed to right now where they're actually not a very good choice at all. Unless, of course, you're doing some sort of group content where you really need a tank who really absolutely has to, absorb a certain amount of damage. Just does not seem to be currently all that good. But I have a thought, stick with it. And as always, the answer seems to be Elden Ring. Elden Ring and PAX Day do share some fundamentals of combat, and that is you can move, you can attack, but you cannot move and attack at the same time. The player must choose. I think it's a great system. However, in PAX Day, your combat options, other than move or attack, I can block, I can attack, and that's it. The enemy does not react to my attacks, nor do I really react to the enemy's attacks. I get hit, my HP drops, they get hit, their HP drops, but that's all. That is, of course, not very interesting. You are just trading health bars at that point. Well, the Dark Souls games and Elden Ring have come up with a solution, and that is stagger damage. So what we're going to see here, I'm going to go just super briefly over poise. You can see right here. Poise in these games is your ability to essentially protect your animation. As I'm swinging, if I get hit during my swing, it can break my animation, therefore the swing doesn't happen. And if my poise is high enough, I can get hit while I'm swinging and my attack will still go through. What does that have to do with combat? Let me show you. So, in combat, much like in just about any other game that has different weapon types, one-handed weapons will traditionally swing faster than two-handed weapons. And the trade-off for that is, of course, one-handed weapons do less damage than two-handed. So nothing mind-boggling there, nothing that is breaking the mold. But why would you want faster attacks over slower attacks? Why take a less damaging attack over a more damaging attack? Well, I will try to show you. So this guy is going to come at me, and this is where your stagger and your so you see how he's hit. He's trying to go into an attack animation, but it won't let him. Because of my faster attacks, and because of whatever his poise threshold is set at, my attacks break his animation, keeping him from attacking. Now, there is a threshold that he has that after, whatever is reached, he no longer is able to be staggered for whatever period of time. So you can't just keep him staggered forever. Whereas, again, with the two-hander, that threshold is probably reached a bit faster, But in doing so, I'm also obviously hitting harder. So it doesn't take as many swings to kill him. That said, with it being slower, any missed attack, anything like that, not great. If his attacks are faster and we're swinging at the same time, who's getting hit first? Me. If my poise isn't high enough, guess what happens? I get staggered, my attack doesn't go through, his does, and he can chain his attacks to follow, much like I might do to him. So this is a system I think that PAX Day could implement to make not only combat more interesting, but to make the weapon choice more interesting. I think that, as currently stands, using a one-handed weapon and a shield does not provide you any benefit at all compared to just using a big two-handed weapon. I think a system that involves some kind of flinching or staggering, or in some way choosing a faster swinging weapon over a slower swinging weapon, is obviously going to make for better combat. But with the shield, I'm trading better defensive properties for overall more damage, the one-handed weapon versus the two-handed weapon. I think that PAX Day can implement a few things. And here we are in Bannerlord. So PAX Day and Elden Ring do share, I think, some commonalities in their combat system. I think because of that, PAX Day could implement a stagger flinch mechanic that Elden Ring or Dark Souls have. I think that would fit very well. But one of the other questions that they need to answer is, why do I want to use weapon X over weapon Y? And I think Bannerlord is got some pretty great examples. Now, Bannerlord, like PAX Day, uses that 3 damage type system. We have blunt or bludgeoning, cut or slash, and pierce. Within Bannerlord, there are other things to take into consideration with your weapon other than just the damage type or the amount. For PAX Day's application, I believe the only other things that matter than the damage type and amount would be swing speed and weapon length. Now these are fairly self-explanatory. My spear is quite long, at a length of 190. My two-handed axe also has pretty good reach at a length of 104. Obviously not going to outrange the spear, but my mace here has a range of a length of 81. My axe would outrange the mace. So just on weapon range alone, I think would provide some interesting combat options in PAX Day. It might be why you choose weapon A over weapon B, even if they're in the same damage types, even if they're different damage types. Maybe you want that sword that might have more reach than your mace. Maybe your mace is shorter. So sure, the sword might be more mitigated, but you can stab them before they can get to you. So you've already got some options there. If we look at the axe, for example, in Bannerlord, I know you can't see the screen that I'm pointing at on there, but there is a shield with a little crack icon through it. The axe in Bannerlord does additional shield damage. And Bannerlord shields have their own health value, they have their own armor. As you can imagine, if you can essentially destroy someone's shield, you have yourself quite an advantage in the battle. Now, I don't think that particular feature necessarily needs to come to PAX Day, but what I do think it could offer, say why I might want the axe over a sword, is if the enemy is blocking, if I hit them with a weapon that has sort of anti-block properties, it does additional stamina damage to them. So as a player, if I see someone coming at me with an axe, I'm going to be thinking in the back of my head, I probably don't want to be blocking that if I can help it, because it's going to be doing increased stamina damage, and I might want that stamina for other things like spells or for blocking somebody else. I may just try to avoid it altogether. So simple properties like, I say simple, but simple properties like that can offer a wealth of options to the combat space. So if we look at Elden Ring with its stagger and its flinch mechanics, if we look at something like Bannerlord with how quickly a weapon will swing, the length that the weapon has, and any additional damaging properties it may have, I think you can combine those together to make not only combat much more interesting, but a reason as to why you would have a shield over a two-handed weapon, or why you might want to employ it. So I think all these things together create a much more robust system for a game like PAX Day than it currently is. I'm not saying these are easy to implement, and I'm not saying they're not already on the way. I know we're still very, very early. I know there's still a lot in the game for the devs to do, but this is something at current I think could help make the game a much more interesting thing to play. So, I've rambled. I've not gone super in depth on everything. I just wanted to give a very basic breakdown on currently why shields are bad, and I wanted to show sort of how we can make shields and one-handed weapons and the like better. And I think a marriage between some of the Elden Ring mechanics and some of the Bannerlord mechanics together, I think would fit PAX Day incredibly well, and I think it would make for a much more enjoyable PvE and PvP experience by providing the players all those different pros and cons of weapon X over weapon Y, and I choose a sword because it swings faster, but the axe does more damage on the block, and so on and so forth. So hopefully this has made some sense. Hopefully I've gotten my point across. I know this is long-winded. What can you do? Anyway, y'all have a good one.